This is the Agribusiness Report. I'm Tony St. James. We're joined today by the Honorable Rick Crawford. He represents the big 1st Congressional District of Arkansas. Great to see you.
Yeah, good to be with you.
Okay, so it's obviously a busy time here. It's always a busy time in D.C., but busy time back home. What are you seeing as far as conditions?
Well, we're in a drought condition, so I mean, we have some thresholds to meet before we could see any kind of a federal declaration at this point. But I was out in the district on Saturday, and the conditions are bleak. We're seeing major sell-offs. This time of the year, to see the volume of cattle moving through our sale barns is really unheard of, particularly moving pairs at this time was, not something you expect to see. So, cattlemen are doing what they can to try and weather this, but the reality is that we're going to have some real challenging times with regard to keeping these cattle producers liquid through this drought period.
And even if you do have available supplies of hay on another part of the state, you still have the cost of getting it there.
Sure, that's the issue. So we don't have any hay available in the state really, and that seems to be fairly widespread. So what we're hearing is cattle producers are going out of state, which increases their transportation costs. And when we see diesel, over $5 a gallon, hasn't really moved. It's not following the trend with gas. Gas is starting to move down a little bit. Diesel is pretty much staying right there at the over $5 a gallon rate. And so when you factor that into the fact that you're having to buy hay at a time when you really don't want to or expect to, and the fact that you're having to get it from out of state, pretty far away, by the way, maybe as far as Georgia, that you're having to truck hay in, that really increased production costs.
We talk about buying hay from Georgia, and it kind of gets me wondering about this. This may be a little far-fetched to throw it out here, but selling land. It's one thing to sell to a neighbor, but it's another thing. We're starting to see a trend of foreign investment in ag. Is that concerning?
Oh, it's absolutely concerning. I mean, you see one of the more high-profile cases of this taking place was recently in North Dakota, where China bought some land in very close proximity to an Air Force base in North Dakota, which obviously what their intention is there. So we have some real concerns about that. Buying up land and generally foreign investment, specifically Chinese, particularly on the ag side. And so my colleague Elise Stefanik and I have introduced legislation that would essentially place the U.S. Ag Secretary as a permanent member of the CFIUS board, and that's the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., and would also essentially create a blacklist of countries that are pretty much forbidden from those kinds of transactions. And you can guess who the usual suspects would be, China being one, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and there may be a couple other additions to that list as well. But I mean, obviously we have some concerns about protecting a vital national security asset, and that's our farm country.
Sometimes we get caught up in because some of our biggest competitors and some of the biggest challenges also come from some of your biggest customers. And obviously China, a major consumer, buyer of U.S. goods. There's been another country, though, that they're aligned with, and that's Cuba. Is there anything happening on that front?
Well, I don't think anybody in Congress has done more than I have to try and move the needle on ag sales in Cuba. But there have been a lot of things transpire in the last couple of years that have really cooled the appetite for that. And most notably, it's been Venezuela. It's been Diaz-Canel's position with regard to Venezuela. So it's not enough to express rhetorical support for Venezuela. As far as Diaz-Canel is concerned, he has committed troops. He's got troops on the ground supporting Maduro, and he has doubled down on that. He's not showing any signs of slowing. And honestly, this can't just be a one-sided type of relationship where we make all these concessions to try and provide food to the island nation of Cuba. I think they have to show some good faith on their part. And when he engages not only in that rhetorically, the moral support for Venezuela, but physically providing troops, Maduro's primary security force is made up of Cubans, and then also, you think about the command and control out in the hinterlands of Venezuela. This is a real problem, and so, I really kind of had to pump the brakes on this because, you cross a line there. Honestly, I'm concerned about American farmers and creating broader market access, globally speaking, but there are some limits to that. And when we have that type of behavior from the leader of Cuba, I think that's an indicator that we need to rethink. And hopefully, he'll rethink the wisdom of that decision and, who do you want to be partners with? And it's clear that he would rather be partners with people like Venezuela. We also have concerns about basing of Russian troops and Chinese troops in Cuba as well. That's taking place. So their economy is in a shambles. They're leaning heavily on Russia and China. Instead of reaching out to us, we've offered the olive branch on many occasions, ag being sort of the forerunner of that. And for our troubles, what we get is Diaz-Canel says we're gonna stick with supporting Venezuela, and we're gonna allow China and Russia to base in our ports and even base here. So that's a real problem.
Is this related at all to the one road plan for China?
For China, everything is related to the Belt and Road Initiative. And their Made in China 2025 initiative. So we are, just about 3 years away from what they consider to be the realization of their goal of everything being made in China. And then, of course, all roads lead to China, the Belt and Road Initiative, globally speaking, and what they do in a very economically belligerent way by going into countries that need help and using debt trap diplomacy to sort of trap them into a relationship with China. And then what happens is invariably a country, gets lured into this debt trap, and there's a default, and the next thing you know, China now owns the rights to mineral extraction, could be the rights to a port, any number of things that we have concerns about. So China is belligerent on all fronts, economically, politically, and militarily, and so that's true in Cuba as well.
You can't write a piece of legislation that covers all of the possibilities. Mm-hmm. But you try through the Farm Bill and reauthorization of the Farm Bill's coming up. What are you watching there?
Well, so the Farm Bill, as you mentioned, it's an overarching policy. And what we have to focus on with regard to the Farm Bill, and honestly I think it's a misnomer, it's a USDA reauthorization. We use the term Farm Bill sort of, as a term that just rolls off the tongue fairly quickly, but the reality is there's a national security component here. It's food security, it's dealing with nutrition, and broadly speaking, production agriculture is a fraction of the total authorization in the USDA reauthorization, which we call the Farm Bill. But there are limits to the authorities of the purview jurisdictionally that the Ag Committee has. And so a lot of times, beyond farm programs and USDA, we have to lean on other committees to get things done. For example, a big problem is H2A. It's a broken program. It resides under the Department of Labor. Jurisdictionally, it has obviously Ways and Means and Foreign Affairs, as well as Judiciary. And ironically, though, that's about agriculture. And so we don't have the authority to go in and adjust or reform H2A as a committee. So we're going to have to take a different approach on that, and that'll be outside of the purview of the Farm Bill. That's one of the issues that we're hearing about far and wide, not just in my district, but across the country, because labor is such an issue. And so that's one example of some of the things that we'll work on outside of the Farm Bill. But the Farm Bill itself, under the current administration, I believe is going to be used as another vehicle to really advance a climate agenda. I don't like that idea at all. And I think that we're going to probably see a management change in the House of Representatives, almost certainly. I think a good possibility that we see a management change in the Senate as well. But the White House is not going to change hands for another couple of years. And so the timeline dictates that we mark up a Farm Bill. The reality is, I'm not sure this president will support anything initiated by Republicans because, at least in the House, we're not going to take that climate agenda approach to marking up another Farm Bill. In fact, probably, I think one of the things that we need to prepare for is a scenario where we probably see an extension and punt into the next administration and hope that we get a better opportunity to do a better job and reflect the wishes of the ag community and rural America writ large without the continuation of this climate agenda that's bearing down on us with this administration.
Always good to see you. Thanks for the work you do, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.
You bet.
Again, it's the Honorable Rick Crawford. He represents the big 1st Congressional District of Arkansas, a member of the House Ag Committee, on today's Agribusiness Report.